How do I make sense of a place where the grandest promises were made and then broken? Today, we'll explore Fort Laramie, a place where history is as complex as the people who lived it. As I walk this ground, I'm discovering a painful truth, a history that went untold in my own education. I came to experience the Oregon Trail, but as I travel, I'm also awakening to a past that was ignored. And standing here, that history feels palpable. This was more than just a fort. It was a crucial crossroads where cultures, paths, and destinies collided. Fort Laramie was a beacon for every immigrant, a symbol of hope on their long journey. Originally established in 1834 as a private fur trading post called Fort William, it was a place where trappers and traders bartered with the Sioux and Cheyenne. But as the trails began to fill with immigrants, its purpose changed. By the time the U.S. Army took over, it had become a crucial landmark and a psychological turning point. For the weary pioneers, this was, in a very real sense, halfway to heaven, a place that marked the end of the flat, endless plains and the beginning of the rugged mountains ahead. But this massive influx of humanity, while a lifeline for the pioneers, was a catastrophe for the tribes whose very way of life was being erased. For the Native American tribes, the pioneers' journey was at first a curiosity, but the gold rush years brought a horrifying reality. The immigrants' livestock devoured the grass that their own ponies depended upon. Axes cut down the timber that once sheltered their teepees, and rifles took the buffalo that sustained them. American soldiers and settlers took the land, and with them came diseases that took lives. What was at stake was expressed most eloquently by the Eastern Shoshone chief Washakie. In 1855, he said, "This country was once covered with buffalo, elk, deer, and antelope, and we had plenty to eat. But now, since the white man has made a road across our land and has killed off our game, we are hungry and there is nothing for us to eat. Our women and children cry for food, and we have no food to give them." It was, at its heart, a clash between two entirely different worldviews. One saw the land as something to be used but not owned, a place where you took what you needed while contributing to the cycle of life. It was a place for shared bounty, like a bee pollinating a flower. But the other worldview saw the land as something to possess and control, a difference that made it maddeningly impossible for these two worlds to exist in the same place at the same time. Where the two cultures rubbed together, there was heat, and tragically, this would lead to fire. It was in this context that thousands of Native Americans and U.S. government officials gathered for a massive council in 1851. It was an event they called the Great Smoke. For a few weeks, this land was filled with hope as they signed a treaty intended to bring peace to the West. But that hope would eventually fade. The treaty would be broken and the conflict would grow, making this place a crossroads of broken promises, where every choice, every vow made, had a ripple effect that still echoes today. It was a place where, as one Native American leader's famous words lamented, the only promise ever kept was the one to take the land. These weathered markers stand on the very ground where history was made. For weeks in 1851, this empty landscape was a temporary city. I was struck by the fact that more than 10,000 Native Americans from dozens of tribes, including the Lakota, Cheyenne, Arapaho, Crow, and Assiniboine, came together for this great council. The sheer number of people gathered here is a testament to the hope for peace that filled this place. To understand what was lost, we have to see what was here before. A vast landscape, a home to sovereign nations, a living map of cultures with no borders. Then, with the stroke of a pen, those promises were broken. The land was redrawn, and what was once a home was reduced to a fraction of its former self, leaving behind a stark and painful legacy. This is a legacy that reminds us that progress cannot come at the cost of another's humanity. It's a call to look at the past, not to dwell in pity, but to learn from it and do better today. It's easy to get mired in the muck of what happened here, to focus only on the broken promises and the tragedy. But as I stand here, I'm not just reflecting on their story, but on our story, on a shared human story of challenge, heartbreak, and tragedy. Perhaps not on this scale or in this specific way, but the feelings of loss, the weight of broken promises, and the struggle to survive are something we all understand. This is a story of what happened here, and in a way, it's a story about all of us. As I leave this part of the fort behind, I can still feel the weight of its history, but I'm ready to explore some of its humanity too. They say the soldiers resorted to making their own beer because the water was so bad. As a wine girl, I would have planted grapevines, but this speaks to how even the simple need to quench one's thirst had a mucky side. And speaking of getting mired in the muck, I was just walking along when this interesting structure caught my eye. I was admiring the brickwork, wondering about its purpose, and then I came across the sign that explained it was the fort's latrine pit. The same river that provided them with their only drinking water also served as their sewer. No wonder the soldiers made beer. Another way to cope with their harsh surroundings was the sutler's store. It was an essential gathering place for soldiers and settlers alike. Here they could find not only supplies, but also a sense of community, where stories were shared over a drink and the challenges of frontier life were momentarily forgotten. These beautifully restored buildings echo the camaraderie that once filled the air, with their aged wood floors and walls that could tell countless tales of the past. The old commissary storehouse now houses the park's visitor center. It features preserved graffiti left by soldiers who served here. This signature, written by Private William R. Mooney of Company E of the 7th Infantry, is a quiet echo of the marks pioneers left along the Oregon Trail. These mini acts of defiance against time connect us. We all want to be remembered, to leave our mark, and to say to the future, I was here. I found myself drawn to this building with its incredibly thick walls. This restored ruin is the quartermaster's storehouse, also known as the Old Stone Store. Its walls were built to be fireproof and secure, protecting the fort's most valuable supplies, among them the food. The old Fort Hospital ruin stands on a small hill overlooking the grounds. This structure once had 12 beds for the sick and injured. I found it surprising that patients were seldom treated by a qualified doctor, even though the fort had a surgeon. For every life lost in a skirmish or battle, more died due to cholera and accidents on the trail. There's something extraordinary about walking the grounds of a place like Fort Laramie, where so much history has been preserved. In this video, I can only scratch the surface of all the lives lived here, but I wanted to share a few final glimpses into this unique place. Everything here has a fascinating history, and this guardhouse was no exception. After visiting Fort Kearney, I was surprised to learn that Fort Laramie was never a walled fort. The National Park Service notes that the very presence of its soldiers and its guns was considered power enough to deter, and the tools of that power are on display here. From a 12-pound mountain howitzer to a Hotchkiss gun, and the wagons that move them across this land. But the guardhouse also holds a darker secret. During restorations, foundations of the old guardhouse were discovered below this building, and it's here that the secret lies. They discovered cells for solitary confinement that were 5 feet by 5 feet, which meant that it was impossible for prisoners to stand. The old guardhouse was ultimately replaced due to complaints about these harsh conditions. The surgeon's quarters was one of my favorite sites at the fort. While all the buildings have been meticulously restored, this one received exceptional attention to detail. To preserve its elegance, the rooms are protected with plexiglass coverings over the doorways, which sometimes created a glare when I was filming. I hope the beauty of the space comes through in the video. Half of this duplex served as the residence for the post surgeon and his family from 1885 to 1889. In addition to his medical duties, the surgeon was responsible for maintaining daily weather records and collecting scientific specimens, showcasing the multifaceted role he played at the fort. This is the Lieutenant Colonel's quarters, where Andrew Sheridan Burt lived with his family. It's definitely plainer than the more ornate surgeon's quarters and reflects a simpler style, typical of military life. During the restoration of this building, Reynolds Burt, the lieutenant colonel's son, provided valuable insights for the restoration of the residence through his written memories. He had written down a clear recollection of the furnishings in the house he lived in as a boy in 1888, and this was a huge help in accurately restoring the period details. Doesn't it seem that each building in ruin here tells its own tale? Whether it's barracks, a hospital, or the general sink, together they weave a picture of the men and women who lived and worked here, along with the Native Americans whose lives were forever changed by this place. I have discovered that Fort Laramie is not just a monument to a single story. It's a rich tapestry woven from two very different perspectives. Check out these old glass windows. Aren't they beautiful? Their beauty is in the blemishes and imperfections, which reminds me, the flaws in the glass are like the threads in the tapestry that have shaped our history. Even what are considered faults or failures can actually reveal something beautiful. I remember again that history is never simple. As I continue this journey along the Oregon Trail, I'm reflecting on the past, warts and all, and leaning into a top-down perspective of history. Just like this hawk's bird's eye view, I can gain a clearer understanding of the past and appreciate the intricate, interwoven fabric of lives that have shaped Fort Laramie and this country. As we continue along the path of the Oregon Trail pioneers, we'll cross the very bridge that carried them into the unknown, walk in the deep ruts they left behind, and stand before the cliff where they carved their names, their hopes, and their dreams into stone. Next time, the physical record of a story that shaped a nation. Thanks for watching, and happy trails.